Melanie Tait. What's your middle name?
Jane. Very 1980s.
Of course it is.
It's either Jane or Marie if you're born in the 1980s.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Or Louise. Louise,
Yeah,
Jane,
Louise.
or Marie. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all there
What's
was.
yours?
I got Justice, but it was Elizabeth when I was born. I changed it to Justice because my great-grandfather times 7, I found out later in life that his name was Felix Eustace, and they anglicised it to Justice. So we have our family name is Justice, and I thought that's such a great name.
Yeah.
So Justice is my middle name. Changed it because the women in your family never get to keep their names, and my mother didn't get to keep her name, and Justice got bred out at some point. So I'm brought it back.
And no offence to Daddy Jones, but Justice is a much better surname than Jones.
And Jones is not my real name either, but that's a whole other story. We'll go down another time because this isn't about me. This is about you. Welcome to me. It's so good to finally have you on my podcast because you have your own podcast and it's wonderful. And you and I are friends and I adore you and you adore me and we just adore each other. But it's so nice because you're a playwright and a screenwriter and a novelist.
Well, you know what? I've written 2 books, but they weren't novels. One of them was like a story about when I had a gastric band. So one of them was about gastric banding. And the other one I ghost wrote for Allen and Unwin. I'm not actually allowed to say what it was, but, it was like somebody's memoir. I ghost wrote. So I've officially written 2 books. And my family has all said to me, don't ever write another book because you're a nightmare while you're writing a book. You hate every moment of it. It's so stressful. So so I'm not I would love to be a novelist, but I've tried to write novels, fiction, lots of time. I'm just not very good at it, unfortunately.
Not very good at it. Yeah, well, you got to stick to your strengths because you're a very good playwright, very good screenwriter. Very good. Now let's talk about what you one of your most successful is the Appleton Ladies potato race. It's not potato sack race, even though the potatoes are in a sack.
Yeah,
discuss.
It's officially called the potato race. So it's inspired. The play itself was inspired by something that happened in my real life in my hometown, which is the town of not only the big potato, but the annual potato races, and they call them the potato races. In fact, it's funny because I've just been trying to name a new play in the last couple of weeks, and the artistic director of Ensemble Theatre, who I have developed, this will be my 4th new play with them, Mark Kilmurray, he was the one that called it the Appleton Ladies Potato Race. I was going to call it just the Potato Race. It was called the Potato Race for such a long time. And then he said, why don't we call it the Appleton Ladies Potato Race? And it was such a genius move. It was such a genius move. Well, I think that it was around that time, when there was like all these sort of books about ladies' book clubs or potato Guernsey societies and things like that I think it was kind of commercially it was something that appealed to an audience, and I'm really, really glad because
good.
Yeah, it does. And it looks great. It's, published little play now and it looks great on the cover of the Appleton Ladies Potato Race rather than the potato race. It's sort of, I don't know, it jumps out more or something.
Theatres do it. They put it on.
Yes.
How does that feel?
Oh, it's amazing. So that play has just been, I feel like one of the great blessings of my life. It had this amazing first initial production at Ensemble Theatre, which was sold out before it even opened. Like it's just amazing.
No.
On that name, I'm sure, and we had this amazing cast. But since then, I think it's had something like 5 or 6 big professional productions. And then I think, honestly, I couldn't even count the amount of community theatre productions that it's had. But I reckon maybe it's about 30. And every time there is one, I'm so grateful because it it'll pay my electricity bill or it'll pay, it's just this beautiful, for a start, I always get this beautiful feedback from companies like the professional companies and the community theatre companies. It's a play with 5 women. The 5 women always end up besties at the end of it. they kind of end up bonded for life. They all love each other. So that's a beautiful thing. But it's also like this beautiful passive income that allows me to be a professional writer, you know. I just, I feel, I feel so lucky with that play. I think it's had one international production in New Zealand. It hasn't had, I sort of would love it to be in the UK or the US, and I think
I would love to see it. It would go so well in the UK. You should tell Dawn French to produce it.
Oh, can you imagine? Yeah, because
I can. I can totally see it.
Yeah, it would work so beautifully, like in the north of England or in Scotland or anywhere that's rural, you know, and has all those same issues that that are inside the play about, you know, not gentrification, but, you know, class warfare between people that have been in a country town forever and the people that come in and try to have a new life, all that kind of stuff. So I would love to see it overseas.
And the women, just the feminist, you know, vibe that it has of empowering women, you know, is obviously what I would love the most about it. But I also like how you've written the dickheads, the men, like one in particular. He's just such a dickhead. And it was made into a movie for Channel 10. So anyone listening, you can go and watch it on 10 Play. Is it still on?
Yeah, it's on 10 Play now. I think so. I hope so. Yeah. Otherwise, I keep hearing from people that have flown Emirates that it's on Emirates.
There, you can do it that way. You can get it in that way.
But hopefully there'll be look at your local community theatre, and there might be a production of it there sometime soon.
Oh, well, it's just a perfect play for that, for community theatre, for professional theatre, but especially community theatre, because so many people would love to get involved, and a lot more women do, you know, community theatre than men. So it's perfect because you've always got, you know, a lot of women to have to choose from for smaller roles in most plays. And this is a really great play that's like, so they'd just be going, oh, that one's just amazing. It's going to go forever.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's funny because I've recently sort of started to think of 2 ideas for new plays, you know, for when I'm finished working on the stuff I'm working on now. And one of them is another one with 5 women. And I've got to tell you, half of me is like, of course I'm excited about doing the play, but the other half of me is like, oh my God, that's another one that will, like every community theatre in Australia would do it because it's got 5 women in it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about what your work. Well, before we get to the new stuff, I want to first talk about you growing up in Robertson, the big potato.
Yeah.
And your name's Melanie Potato.
It is. It is. Like, it's such nominative determinism, isn't it? Like, I think about,
it really is.
Yeah, when you've got a surname like Tait, like, of course you're going to be the person that owns the big potato, and you're also going to, of course, be a little fatty as a kid. Like, how are you not going to be when your name's Tait?
What better child is there, honestly, than a potato child?
There's no better child than a potato. And, you know, all 4 little potatoes, as we were, there's 4 of us, are all completely delightful because we were born potatoes. You know, we grew up as potatoes.
Yeah, and potatoes are the best. Potatoes,
they're the most
I've
delicious.
Got a potato right now. I've got a Coco potato who is the roundest dog I've ever had in my life, and I just picked her up from having her dental, and all the nurses come out and they were gushing because she's a potato. I was like, look at her little brown belly. It's a potato. I just love. Who doesn't love potatoes?
Well, anybody that doesn't love potatoes, I think you've got to be wary of.
Yeah, and there's nothing better than a chubby child.
Oh, it's our family's full of them. Like so 4 little potatoes. We grew up in this tiny little town. And, you know, it's funny though, I've never had good potato nicknames. My sister gets great potato nicknames. You know, she gets called Sweet Tatey. She's like a barrister, and they call her Sweet Tatey. That's great. I shouldn't say she's a barrister. She gets mad at me saying she's a barrister because she's done the bar course, but she's still got to do one other thing. So she's a lawyer, and they call her Sweet Tatey.
When did you decide that writing plays was going to be something that you were wanted to do, and then decide I can do this?
Yvie, I didn't even know it was a thing you could do, but my whole life kind of led to it, if that makes sense. Like. Mm-hmm. I wrote my first play in year 5, and it was about the Titanic, and we put it on like and this was before James Cameron. I'm older. I'm quite old, you know, like this was.
Do you think he stole it from you?
Yeah, of course he did. He got got the word from Robbo PS. And
the title characters, Jack and Rose.
Yeah, exactly. Those of us performing it out the front of the Dunnies on a really cold day. And I remember my friend Anthea, she was the only one who had a computer. So she took the notes home and typed it up. And I was such a little bastard. When she brought it back, I accused her of giving herself the good lines. So I knew how a play works. Like I knew what the funny lines were and all that kind of stuff. Isn't that outrageous?
And you knew how to direct and produce.
Yeah, all of that.
And edit.
So, all of that. So I was always writing. I thought I wanted to be an actor though. So I was always reading plays and, you know, getting currency press plays from the library or from secondhand shops. Like it amazes me now that David Williamson, the Australian playwright, I consider him sort of like a friend and somebody who gives me guidance now when I spent so much time. Yeah, and I spent so much time as a young person like finding his plays in op shops or in secondhand shops or at school. They were kind of life to me. So I kind of think I was always meant to do it. And then when I was 21, I wrote a play in London called The Vegemite Tales, which I wanted to use to fund. I wanted to have a musical theatre company, like a musical theatre little company. And I thought, I'll just write a play and we'll make money from that. Like, what an idiot. Like, I had no idea about anything.
Not at all.
And I didn't even know that when you wrote a play, you could send it to a theatre company and they could put it on. I just assumed that I had to find people
to produce.
Yeah. And my brother, this is amazing. We're amazed by this now in our 40s. My brother for my 21st birthday gave me $500, which like we were talking about this the other night. Neither of us could afford to give each other $500 now for our birthdays. You know what I mean? Like it was such an amazing thing. And I put
it. Did he get $500?
I know, like God love him. I still have no idea, but I kind of owe him my whole career because with that $500, I put a deposit on a theatre for the Vegemite Tales. And the Vegemite Tales it was just such a huge hit. It played for 8 years. The last 2 years it played on the West End. So it was just amazing. It was this freak of nature thing. But of course, being like a woman of very little self-esteem, I thought I'd just fluked that. And I thought that I wasn't a writer. I thought that I was kind of lightweight, that I wasn't sort of. So and to be fair, I think that the industry at the time and also being an Australian in London, so I wasn't having a hit in Australia, which I think would have been a different deal, but an Australian having a hit that poked fun at a lot of English stuff and was very commercial and very broad, I think, I wasn't taken seriously by it. But I actually don't know because I didn't know then, like I never thought to get an agent. I never thought to go and send plays to a theatre companies. I just didn't know. I didn't know anything. No. So I came back to Australia and got a traineeship with the ABC, and I was a journalist for like 12 or 13 or something, like not nearly 2 decades, but a bit over a decade before I wrote The Potato Race. And when I wrote The Potato Race and it was programmed at a professional theatre, I just knew it was my ticket back. You know what I mean? Like I just thought, I've got to make everything I can of this opportunity. And it happened at the time when I had accrued long service leave at the ABC. So instead of taking a long service leave, I quit and I took the money to set me up as a freelancer, to sort of, and I haven't super looked back. Every now and again, it's funny, I'll go back to the ABC and do some work. And it's funny, I recently have gone back because I felt a bit lonely at home all the time. I wanted to be around people, and you know what it's like being a freelancer, how you're just waiting for people to pay you money and you get so behind.
Yes.
And I thought I'll go back. I'll see if anybody remembers me at the ABC. I think I'll see if I can go back. And I was telling one of my friends, and he's like, "Oh, it's just like when you get a bit broke and you have to go home and live with mum and dad for a bit. That's what And I feel so grateful to have that. I actually now feel. When I first got back into playwriting, Yvie, I'd see, I remember seeing an article about beautiful Kate Mulvaney, who we started out at the same time. Isn't she heaven? We started out writing at the same time. And I saw isn't she divine?
Divine.
And one of the most loved people in our industry, like just a heavenly person. And I saw an article about her, and it said something like she had written 27 plays. And I got so sad. I was like, what? How was Kate able to stay in the game? What was it about her that made her either believe in herself or be supported or whatever it was? And I'd get really sad. But then after COVID happened and the times that I've needed, like I said, to go back and work, or I've been, and my research skills and my ability to be able to interview people and talk to people, I'm so, and also I think I would have flamed out as a playwright. Like I would be so cancelled by now by something I had written in my very passionate mid-20s, late 20s. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I'm actually very grateful now, but I work so hard to try and sort of stay in the game because I love working in theatre so much. Like if you've started your working life out in a theatre company like I did with the Vegemite Tales, you think that, I don't know if you have this incredibly connected sort of work life where you're going to work every night with your best friends and you're all in each other's pockets, like drama school kind of people. Yeah. And then to go into the real world, it's kind of weird. And so I feel like being back in theatre, I've been like, I'm home now. Thank God I'm back with these vulnerable, crazy, beautiful people again, and we're a family. Each time, you do a new show, you make a new family. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah, there's nothing like theatre people.
Yeah.
I mean, they're type unto their own, like they're just adorable and loved, and if you're into theatre, you're into theatre. If you're not, those kind of people freak you out. But I mean, I just think they're the most beautiful part of that particular art, that medium.
Yeah.
And the ensemble is such a great theatre. It's Kirribilli, it's just out of the city, so it feels like it's almost a community theatre, but it's a professional one. It's got such a diverse and long, history. Yeah. And I have seen some of the best things that I've ever seen in my life. I remember seeing something when I was in year 9 at school. We went on an excursion to see a matinee, and it was a very serious play. I think it was The One Day of the Year.
Oh, the Alan Seymour play about Anzac Day.
Yeah, about Anzac Day.
Yeah, amazing.
And so there was just a lot of school groups in the audience, and 2 girls wouldn't stop talking, and the mother stopped and said, "I'm sorry, I have to stop. And, you two have got to stop talking. Like, we are trying to work here." And she went off like a mum, and everyone in the audience, especially the little old ladies in the front, were like, and we were all like, all the kids just shat themselves, and their teachers were just mortified. I've never forgotten it. But I'd never seen anything like it since, nothing, like someone break character. And then she was like, okay, let's get back into it. Where were we? Kind of thing. It was incredible. And then we had this huge debate afterwards about whether she should have done that, like whether that's part of her job or should she have just gone on. And, there was so many – I think even my teacher was against her doing that. Wow. Like it was a very interesting – anyway.
But it doesn't –
it's a great theatre.
You sort of speak to something – that's quite wonderful about theatre though, and it's that we're all there, and the adrenaline rush that everybody in that theatre must have felt when that actor stopped the show, every single person, because we're all experiencing this thing together, and then a scary thing like that happens, and you can feel the energy in the room if anything ever goes down like that, can't you? And a theatre like Ensemble, which is it's 300 seats. It's quite small, like you can –
almost in the round.
You can see everything. Like on an opening night, I always feel like you can't ever relax. You have to laugh at everything. You have to, because everybody can see – like the whole audience can see each other, and the actors can see everything you're doing as well. It's so full on.
the play that you're working on at the moment is called The Queen's Nanny.
Yes. Yeah, we're about to start rehearsing.
How exciting. Like, what's the best? Is this a really great part? Because you're just about to start rehearsals. So it's been going for, I'm assuming, a couple of years,
Yes.
like production, like, pre-production. So this is all, now we're in. Like, this is, we've got it all cast.
Yeah, all cast. So this is actually the most delicious part of it, because it's like the world is all in front of you. Do you know what I mean? Like, anything can still happen in a glorious way. Like, there hasn't been some a-hole critic who's hated it and trashed us or anything.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we're just in that beautiful stage where it's cast, and it's cast amazingly. It's a story about Queen Elizabeth II's nanny, who raised her and Princess Margaret for 17 years.
So that's the Queen Mother.
The Queen Mother was the nanny's boss, but the nanny was the nanny to Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Margaret. So the person that who's just died.
Okay.
Yeah. And she basically raised Queen Elizabeth II, because, of course,
this is a true story.
Yeah. And what's amazing about it is this, her name was Crawfie, this woman Crawfie. So she literally, during the war, for example, she slept in cots next to them to protect them. She was their mother while their mother was having to be the queen, off in London. Like, she was a really huge part of their lives from the time that Margaret was a baby and Queen Elizabeth, who is Lilibet in the play, since she was 5. So she raised the queen. She raised that stoic woman that we all kind of knew so well. And when she was retired out at like 38, she was so young, she got the opportunity to write a tell-all memoir about the little princesses growing up. She did it, and she was booted out of the royal family, never spoke to her again. When she died, Yvie, in her 80s, not one of them sent a bunch of flowers or attended her funeral, this woman who'd raised them. It's just, it's the most unbelievable story. And she was always kind of thought of as the great royal traitor. She was the first person to do the sell-all book and stuff.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that, I'm not going to say I found this out, because other people's journalism has, if you put everything together, she thought she had permission to do it from the Queen Mother. And she did and she didn't, and that's what the play is about. It's about sort of like the grey area around it, but also it's about so many things, because, like, I just don't understand how they can, Yvie, like, do you think, when you think about the people that you grew up with, like, I think about, I had this one uncle, my Uncle Barry, and isn't Barry such a great name? Why has it not made a comeback? And why don't either of us have a dog called Barry? That's what I'd like to ask. But
soon.
Yeah, soon. My Uncle Barry became estranged from our family when I was about 12. But I have loved him my whole life, and one night when I was on the radio, he rang me to say he'd heard me. I was doing a national show or something like that on the ABC, and he rang to say he heard me, and then he was so proud of me, and then our Poppy would have been proud of me. And I hadn't spoken to him since I was 12. Like, it was the most amazing, like, that love that he sort of set up from the time I was a child till I was 12 is still strong today. Yeah. Like, he's unwell at the moment, and our relationships have all reignited, thank God. And I kind of, when I think about Crawfie and Lilibet, the Queen, and Princess Margaret, I don't understand how it is that they could just oust this person who had been their life, I find it really amazing. And so I wanted to write about that. I wanted to write about that from a point of view as a woman that doesn't have children. I find all those relationships, those non-parenting relationships, really interesting. Like, Yvie, did you know this? You'll love this. After the Second World War, a friend of mine has done a PhD on this. There was a whole spate of plays and musicals about surrogate mothers. And I say that with, what do you call those things you do with quotation marks, surrogate
marks.
mothers. Yeah. So mothers that weren't actually biological, so nannies, aunties, you know, we've got Auntie Mame, we've got Sound of Music, we've got, you know, all these amazing South Pacific about, mother figures who aren't mothers. And that's what I found really interesting about this story and have really sort of delved into. But we've also got the actual mother in the play too, who is the woman that we know as the Queen Mother, and she's a young woman for most of the play, and that's been really fun to write too.
So when is the play set?
It's set mainly in the 30s and 40s, but it also goes right up to the 80s. It's kind of like a bit of a royal fever dream. Like it's not not The Crown. You know, I think people will be expecting to walk in and find a chaise lounge and you know, crowns and costumes and things like that. But it's super, super duper sort of stylized and fun, and you know, there's lots of allusions to nannies and Mary Poppins, and it's really a bit of a wild ride. Much more, it's not a drawing room drama like The Crown.
So it's fictional? Like, have you made it up or have you written it from interviews with Croft?
So it's mainly written from so the sort of main kind of source materials, I guess. So the timings are all correct, you know, and the things that happened are correct. But I've imagined
like The Crown so far.
Yeah, but I've imagined all the conversations, and I've one thing I cannot get over. Can I just tell you one thing that will break your heart, Yvie?
Come on.
So Crawfie, she was a Scottish nanny, and when she got a buttload of money for writing this book from an American publisher. With the money, she bought a house in Aberdeen that was on the only road. The only way you can get to Balmoral Castle is right past her house, and her house.
So they have to go past her every.
Yep, they'd have to go past her house. No other way of getting to the castle except for past her house. And the story goes that when she knew that they were coming, you know, for the last 40 years of her life, she would prepare a tea and hope that they would drop in. That just one day they would drop in. And God, there's no record. There's no public record at all of them ever dropping in. And I think Princess Margaret was like one of the world's great a-holes, right? So forget about her. But I don't think Queen Elizabeth II was one of the world's great a-holes, you know? Like I think she, for the most part, seemed like a pretty decent person, you know, a pretty duty-bound kind of.
Very duty-bound.
Yes. And so I wonder.
And that almost overrode. I mean, I don't know much about the royals. But I do remember watching The Queen and just how cold she was after Diana died.
Yeah, there's definitely
for so long and had to be really convinced.
Yeah.
To do something and say something, and it you know, just so honor bound and duty bound. So this is the question that I have for you. That then I'll ask another question. What was the book like? Like, was it salacious?
No,
did she tell any secrets? What were they so upset about?
So the book was basically a PR stunt because the Foreign Office, the UK Foreign Office, thought it would be a really good thing for the British royal family, for Britain as a whole after World War II, to ingratiate themselves with the US so that if there was another world war, it wouldn't take the US 3 years to come and join it in Pearl Harbor, you know, so that they would be allies. And one of the ways they thought of doing this is that Americans have always been sort of taken by royalty, and they particularly loved Elizabeth and her handsome, you know, Philip dreamboat husband back then. So they wanted to write these articles, and they went to the Foreign Office, kind of went to Queen Elizabeth, who was Queen Elizabeth at the time, who we know as a Queen Mother, and said, we think it'd be a good idea. She said, great, okay, let's start moving on it. So they got together with this, with an American publisher, and the American publisher started to, you know, ask questions of who should be interviewed for a bunch of stories about the Queen and Princess Margaret as little girls. Where did they go to school? Who were their friends? What did they do during the war? You know, that kind of all really harmless, nice PR sort of stuff that would go in the Ladies' Home Journal in the US. Everybody kept saying to this guy, you've got to talk to Crawfie because Crawfie knows all this stuff. And so he ended up just going, okay, well, Crawfie has to do the book. The Queen, there's correspondence from the Queen mother that says, fine that you do the book, Crawfie, fine that you get paid for it, but just don't put your name to it. We can't have it so that everybody thinks it's okay that people who are close to us do this. So Crawfie, in a way, was kind of, I don't know, she thought she had permission, which she did up to a point, but also you're getting paid $85,000. You're not getting paid to be anonymous, are you? So it's kind of this.
But they specifically asked her not to, and she put a name to it.
The Queen Mother asked her not to.
Okay.
But then the people that were doing,
she did.
Yeah, and she did. The people that were doing the book sort of convinced her that the Queen Mother would be all right with it once she read how harmless the book was. And, of course, she wasn't. So, and the book is harmless.
And then they just cut her off.
Cut her dead. You know, oh, you'll love this. Oh, but you might not if you're not, like, into all the royal stories. So
no, I'm into this. Yeah,
so Harry and Meghan, as everybody knows that's watched the Netflix stuff.
I'm into that. I'm into them.
So Harry and Meghan were put into Nottingham Cottage, which is a tiny little cottage on the grounds of Kensington Palace. That had been Crawfie and her husband's cottage. When Crawfie was retired out of the royal family, they gave her Nottingham Cottage. So she was then cottage. Yeah. So she was ousted from the cottage, basically, her grace and favour cottage. Isn't it interesting, though? I was thinking about this the other night. Harry now, after writing his book, has been completely ousted by them now too. They don't want anything to do with him now. That's the thing.
That was my next question, was that who haven't they ousted that it's written anything about
now
them?
This is what I find interesting about the end of my play, and what I find really confusing about it, and about the Queen in particular, is I was in London when I was researching this play. I ended up talking with this man who is one of the executive producers of The Crown, and we so got into this story, you know, because he, of course, knew the story as well, but they'd never put it in The Crown, thank God, for me.
Okay, and that's the other thing I was going to ask. Was she ever in The Crown anywhere?
Crawfie. I don't know. You know, it's interesting. Yeah. The story's not, but I'd love to, I reckon.
But the character might have been.
Yeah, the character might be in the background or something for nerds like me who would recognise, you know, but I can't remember now. And I deliberately haven't gone back and watched those early ones because I don't want it influencing anything in the play.
Yeah, good.
So this I kept saying, I said to this producer, my real issue is the end of the play. The ending that we know is going to just send everybody out into the night depressed as hell, like going, what a bunch of a-holes, which they are. Yeah. Like, but also I don't like sending people out without hope or something. You know what I mean? Like or without something. I don't want them to be going out into the night depressed after I don't think that it needs to make you happy all the time at all. But I personally, I don't want to send people out like there's no hope or something. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But anyway.
You don't want a European film.
No, not when people are paying $100 and they're getting a babysitter, and like there's so much theatre I go to that I think, oh my God, if I took my dad to that, he would never go to the theatre again. That's why people don't go to the theatre, stuff like that. And I want people to see one of my plays and then say, go to you, Yvie, you've got to see that. That was so, good. And I also want them to talk about it afterwards. Anyway, this producer, I said, I'm really worried about, sending poor old Crawfie standing there yet again waiting for them to come for tea, and they don't come. And he said, well, one thing we do know about the Queen, he said, it might not be in any of the records, but what we do know about her actually is that she was a deeply Christian woman who really lived her life according to the Christian rules of forgiveness. So he thought that there was no reason why she couldn't have dropped in one afternoon just without anybody knowing. There are a couple of things she did in her life that did show great forgiveness towards people. Like, for example, Fergie was always around. Fergie was always housed and I think she kind of learnt something from the ousting of Diana. I mean, I don't know, but there's a few kind of, you know, rotten eggs she's kept around, that she kept around and kept, you know, footed the bill for. So I'd like to think that maybe she did go and see Crawford, but also I also think that had the Queen Mother died before Crawford died, she definitely would have. But the Queen Mother died a long time after Crawford died. Crawford died in 1988 and the Queen Mother died in 2001 or 2002. I hate that I know these things, Yvie.
I always thought, no.
I hate myself for knowing way too much about the royal family.
See, I thought when I found out you've written a play about the royals in any way, I thought you were a royalist, and it's just something I didn't know about you, and I was going to have to accept. And just tolerate.
Yeah, tolerate.
Or, you know, maybe use at some point in time if I needed a trivia pursuit question answered. But there's not many of us that don't know quite a lot now about the royal family because of the Crown and because of Diana. Like, we're just, you know, especially now with Meghan, you know, and Harry just being such a little rock star, we all just know, you know, we've all got opinions and everything, but you aren't a royalist.
No, but, mate, it's funny, like, you know, when you say we all know now because of the Crown, my knowledge of the royal family is so deep that I can watch The Crown and tell you which biographies the stories have come from. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've read them all. I've done, like, so I'm not a royalist. I'm absolutely not a royalist. I'm 100% a Republican. I find them appalling. I find their riches appalling while people sleep on the streets of London. Yes. I find that display we saw over the weekend, the Trooping of the Colour, appalling. I find the way that Kate and William so decide what information goes to the public and what doesn't appalling. You know what I mean? If they want privacy, give your house back. Stop going on your bloody fancy holidays that are paid for by everybody else.
Private.
Yeah. So I find them appalling, and they're a bunch of kind of, I find them, they're so normal and kind of uninteresting and, well, not uninteresting. There's obviously something that's interesting, but there's, you know.
No, they're not interesting people.
But as people, they're kind of dull, and I find it and unimpressive. Like, I find it so amazing that they're given everything. No skill. Not one of them's ever gone off and been a doctor or been a lawyer or done something.
Nothing.
Yeah. So.
No.
I mean,
they are not saving the world in a good way.
No. So.
And I get that. I am like that with religion. Absolutely abhor religion, but I know so much about it because of my gross obsession with it.
Well, my obsession started out when I was a kid, and it started out as I loved them when I was a kid. So my mother's a massive royalist, and I used to write, like, I wrote this letter to the Queen when I knew she was coming to Australia to invite her to come to my school, and of course they write back and say, unfortunately, you know, we won't be able to, but thank you. I wrote a letter to Diana saying I was so upset that Andrew Morton had written that book about her and that had hung her out to dry. And I think I even put that I thought he should be hanged or something. Like, I was just such a little country kid neocon. Yeah. And it was only sort of growing up and, like, learning about class and equality and living in London for 5 years. And the 5 years of my life that I was a massive, massive lefty. I think I'm sort of more of a radical centralist these days, but maybe not. But I don't know. It just, like, it was so terrible to me that they had, you know, there was so much poverty in the UK, and yet Buckingham Palace exists.
They let them eat cake.
Yeah, and there are empty bedrooms in those places where people could be sleeping. And it's terrible. Yeah.
I love that you've written a play about a woman who was shunned by them.
Yeah.
And I really hope that, you know, you've given it to them a little.
You'll have to come and see it.
Oh, I will be coming to see it. Do you think there's going to be some royalists that are going to be penning you a little bit of evil letters?
Yeah, I think, for example, I don't think I'll be hearing from their lawyers, but I think that, you know, royalists, like, I think my mother's going to be a bit upset by it, you know, royalist person. But I also...
Do you think someone's going to say, I hope they hang you?
Wouldn't that be funny?
I hope their child
Traitor!
writes you a letter and says, and you know what else? I hope they hang you.
Mate, he and Camilsey are meant to be in Australia. I don't know if they will be because of his cancer when the play's on. And I kind of like, he's a big...
he could come with a rubber ring to sit on.
He's a big theatre fan. He loves the theatre. God love him. Like, he's really into the arts.
There's no way he would come and see a play about the royals. There's no way.
There's no
He'd be
way.
like, oh, what's it about? Oh, about her. God, we're not allowed to speak of her.
No. Well, can I tell you a cool bit of trivia?
Yes.
Just before.
Yes.
So the only thing that makes us think there was a thawing of the freeze towards Crawford is that there's a documentary made just before the Queen. It was either for her gazillion jubilee or her 90th birthday, something, and it was the family all watching home videos and talking about it. And in this one home video, Charles and the Queen were sitting there and Crawford's in the video, and he says, oh, that's Miss Crawford there. And she says, yes. That's it. And that's what everybody thinks is the thawing, like that she was kind of, her role has been accepted back into the fold because she was acknowledged in this documentary. So, yeah, I don't know. The thing that bothers me...
People are really reaching, aren't they?
Yeah. The thing that bothers me a bit, Yvie, I don't know how you'll feel about this too, is that I went into writing it thinking the Queen mother was like the baddie of the piece. Mm. And I read all her letters and I read all her, all the biographies, and I went to her homes and stuff like that. And I ended up really understanding like why she did what she did and actually feeling very warm towards her because she had been fat shamed her entire life. From the time she was a little girl, she was teased about how much she ate. And then when she came into the royal family, her nickname was Cookie because she was as round as an American, chocolate chip cookie.
Yeah.
And, like all this, her entire life was kind of like the frumpy, fat second kind of thing. And anyone that's experienced any sort of fat shaming knows that it wears away at your self-esteem, but it also hardens you the F up, doesn't it?
It does.
And
it does, but also gives you great empathy and sympathy.
Yeah.
It's a shame they didn't call her Potato.
I'm sure someone did. I'm sure we'd be able to find some fat slur that is a potato slur at her from somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. But Cookie is pretty good as far as fat slurs go.
Yeah.
Cookie is pretty good.
It's actually kind of cute. That's the thing about
it's cute.
Don't you think a lot of fat slurs are actually kind of cute? Like potato's cute, Cookie's cute.
I don't think they're slurs. I don't even think the word fat, people argue all the time fat is an insult. Yeah, because people say it as an insult.
Yeah, but it's not. No, it's a statement of fact.
Fat is not a bad word.
Yeah.
And fat is a type of body and thin is a type of body, and it's a descriptive term, and fat is yum.
Yeah, isn't it? It's
and if
so
you didn't
lush.
have fat, your brain would die.
Yeah.
You would have no thoughts.
And don't you think too about like I've got a little niece and nephew, and I just know they love nestling into my
nothing better.
Oh, and it's just the greatest, isn't it?
I used to hate being told by my grandmother to stop playing with her fat arms.
Oh.
Because I didn't understand why. I was just rejected. All I wanted to do was touch it. It was
didn't realise that you loved it.
Fat skin. It was beautiful. And then I'd touch it until it had gone warm. And then I'd touch another part that was cold and I'd turn that warm. And she used to go, stop doing that. I don't like it. Don't, because it's it's so ugly. And I'm like,
no,
I don't understand why you would. I couldn't, do that in my head. What? I'm just being naughty. And I had a fat mother. It's just every child I know that has a fat mother just looks at them and loves them and holds them there's nothing better.
There's nothing better.
I love putting my arm around a fat waist.
Yeah, or having a hug with like a proper hug. You know who are the worst? It's interesting that tall, skinny men rule the world and get all the jobs and all the money because they're the worst people in the world to hug. Absolute worst.
Yeah.
They can't.
Well, you don't hug them, do you?
No, well, you
can't hug them because they're too busy making money and, firing people. Melanie Tait.
Yvie.
Taters.
Yvie, let your hair hang down. You've been such a delight. I want to sing to you so much right now.
Thank you for coming on to my podcast. I've been wanting you on for months. You can ask my producer. You've been on the list for such a long time, and I'm so glad that I finally got you. Thank you for giving me the time. Shookers with the show. When does it begin? When can people book tickets? Are there pre-sales on now?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put the link in our bio.
Thank you.
Not in our bio. We'll put the link in our show notes. And what dates does it start and go till?
It opens on the 6th of September, which is going to be here in half an hour.
That's soon.
Yeah,
really
and it goes
soon.
until, I think, it goes until something like the 16th of October? September, October.
Great.
Yeah, so it goes...
Oh, that's a good run.
Yeah, it's about 8 weeks.
Oh, I'll be there.
It's great.
Oh, well, Shookers for the rehearsal start. My goodness. Well, I'll be following closely. Anyone that wants to follow Melanie on the Instagrams, you'll be able to see all the updates on everything that she does. Melanie J. Tait.
That's right.
On the Instagram.
That's right, for Jane.
For Jane, yes, not for Jesus. Love you.
Love you too. Thanks so much, mate. You're the best.